Neither Jim or I grew up in this farming or homesteading lifestyle. We both had a pretty typical 90s suburban upbringing filled with tons of processed food and TV. For us, the big instigator into this homestead, from-scratch life was our own health struggles, and specifically with infertility. But I learned a ton along the way and really believe that there were a handful of specific things that I added that made a big difference in us getting pregnant after a few years of infertility and miscarriage, and then continuing to do these things as a lifestyle that allowed us to easily get pregnant with our subsequent 3 kids.
Is this what you'd like? Yes. Yes.
With a video like this, I have to put a quick disclaimer out there first. This is not medical advice, it's only my personal experience. It's important to know that with my story, I was coming into wanting to have a baby from a place of significant depletion. I had been a marathon and long distance runner for years, and my body was significantly undernourished for the type of exercise that I was doing. I'll link below to one of the early videos that we did where I share the full story of my experience with hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is what this condition is called, and how I recovered from it. But for me, even after doing all of the right things for a few years, stopping running completely, eating a diet of real whole foods, gaining over 30 pounds to restore my cycle, I was still having a hard time getting pregnant, with the exception of one early miscarriage. That's when I started to dive deeper to try to figure out what the missing pieces could be. I'm going to share what those are, but I wanted to mention too that these things that I'm going to share really aren't just for women who are wanting to conceive. These are really all things that I've incorporated into our world as part of a healthy lifestyle for all of us. So yes, they really seem to help with conception and to have smooth pregnancies, labors, and deliveries and healthy babies, but they're also just really great things for health, regardless of age and stage. One of the most significant ones was beginning to include organ meats and specifically beef liver into my regular diet. How I've been doing this for well over a decade now is by turning beef liver into a pate and then mixing a scoop of that pate around a half an ounce into my eggs each morning. You may be thinking, yuck, but it's worked well for me. When I first started making liver pate, I couldn't stand the taste or the smell, but mixing it into my eggs masked it enough that I could eat it without a problem. Now, many years later, I don't mind the smell or taste at all, but I continue eating it this way because it's just an easy way that I know I'm getting that liver in every day and I don't have to think about it. I've gotten a lot of objections over the years about eating liver. Isn't the liver where the toxins are stored in the body? And while yes, it is true that one of the liver's roles is to neutralize toxins like drugs, poisons, or chemicals, it does not actually store those toxins. The toxins that the body cannot eliminate are more likely to be stored in fatty tissue. But the liver does store so many important nutrients like vitamins A, D, E, K, B12, folic acid, and minerals like copper and iron. In fact, many traditional cultures consumed only the organ meats, and then the muscle meats that are so popular in our culture were discarded or given to animals. I make a really basic pate. I just sear some beef liver in fat with a few garlic cloves for a couple of minutes. It's still pretty red on the inside. You don't want to overcook your liver.
All she has to do is blend it, then it will be done.
And then I blend it into a puree with any additional spices you want to add. I mainly just add salt. Sometimes I'll add a little broth or whey to thin it out if that's needed. When I made it at the beginning, I used to doctor it up a lot more to try to mask the taste and the smell by adding bacon and more seasonings, but now I keep it really basic and I enjoy it that way. containers. You want to taste it?
We need a scraper.
But there might be one that might be this one more.
Liquidy.
A little liquidy, soft. Taste it. Good. All right. Good. All right. Honestly, the process of making pate is kind of a pain. So what I like to do is make a large batch with maybe 3 or 4 pounds worth of beef liver every few months. So to do this, I scoop the pate once it's made into silicone muffin cups or a mini bread loaf pan that I have, and then I freeze them. I pull out one at a time to thaw that we'll eat over the course of a few days, and then I'll pull out another. This way, I never have to worry about pate going bad or needing to make it all the time. Liver is really potent and robust in terms of nutrients, so you don't need to overdo it. One 3 to 4 ounce portion each week is great. Or I like to do around a half an ounce each day, which equates to 3.5 ounces each week. And these days, if you don't want to make your own liver, there are tons of high quality organ meat supplements out there that you can use instead. This is what I'll do when we're traveling. I'd also recommend prioritizing sourcing when it comes to finding organ meats. Ideally, pasture-raised and grass-fed would be best. We always source our liver from either cows that we raise here or local farms where we know that they follow similar practices. Not only are there more nutrients, but it's also just going to be more beneficial to the local farmer, the community, and the environment as a whole. So if I had to suggest just one thing dietary-wise, this would be it. Incorporating liver had such a significant impact in how I felt, and I really believed it helped my body restore its nutrient stores following years of depletion. Another thing that I started incorporating daily was homemade bone broth. Before getting pregnant with our daughter, I worked at an office desk job. So each week I'd turn a few packages of beef soup bones or beef shanks into a super nutrient-dense broth. The beef shank is the shin of the cow, and it's the part of the animal that's most highly concentrated in bone marrow, which is known to have a ton of healing properties for gut health, reducing inflammation, and boosting the immune system. I'd strain off the broth and add the meat into a casserole, soup, or stir fry that we were having, and then I'd heat up a cup or 2 of the broth every morning, crack an egg or 2 into the hot broth, stir it all together, and have an egg drop soup that I'd bring to work in a thermos and sip on every day. Now my broth consumption looks a little different. So each week I slow cook a whole chicken in water, which gives us around 3 to 4 quarts of gelatin-rich golden broth. I use that every week in soups or to cook rice in, or sometimes we'll just sip on it. I'll still make beef broth from beef soup bones or other types of broth with collagen-rich cuts of meat like pork hocks throughout the year, but chicken broth is a staple in our diet each week now. Fermented foods are another thing that I began incorporating daily and being more intentional with. So I'd already been making my own yogurt for a few years and having that regularly, but I started making my own sauerkraut and making sure that I was getting a tablespoon or 2 of that in every day too. If you look into what happens in foods that are naturally fermented, it's fascinating to see the way that this simple preservation method can really boost the nutrition of that food. Fermentation is known for the way that it adds good gut bacteria, which can promote gut health and introduce enzymes to help break down food and absorb nutrients more easily to get the most out of the foods that you're eating. But it can also enhance other nutrients. So for example, there's been evidence that turning cabbage into sauerkraut can increase the amount of vitamin C by up to 10 times simply by fermenting it. Sauerkraut is another thing I like to make bulk amounts of a few times a year. Since fermentation is a traditional preservation method, fermented foods can store safely for months, and we always grow plenty of cabbage with the primary intent of turning most of it into sauerkraut. My favorite type of cabbage to grow is red calabash cabbage. I like it because it stores really well and has seemed to be a bit more resistant to pests than green cabbage varieties that we've tried. This is cabbage that we harvested in October, and I'm just now getting around to turning it into sauerkraut, but it's still looking great after being stored for 3 or so months in the fridge. To make sauerkraut, I shred the cabbage down and put it into a large bowl and sprinkle it with plenty of sea salt. My favorite salt to use is Redmond sea salt that we buy in 25-pound bags. I like to let the cabbage sit with the salt for at least 10 or 15 minutes before extracting the liquid from the cabbage to let the sea salt start to do that process naturally. Then I just scoop the cabbage into quart-sized jars and using a wooden spoon, press the cabbage down. What you need to do is extract enough liquid from the salted cabbage to completely cover all the cabbage with the brine. If the cabbage is exposed to air at the top and not fully submerged in the liquid, this is when mold can begin to form. Once there's enough liquid fully covering the cabbage, I put a lid on top. I prefer to use plastic lids as opposed to metal ones when making sauerkraut because the acid in the fermented cabbage will easily cause the lid to rust. After it's made, I let it sit on the counter for around a week to let it ferment. During this time, while it's fermenting, I like to check on it daily. I'll open the lid to burp the jar, which releases the gases, as well as press down any cabbage that may have worked its way to the top above the liquid to prevent any mold from forming. And that's it. You can certainly add other spices or vegetables with your cabbage if you like, but I tend to keep it simple. Once it's been roughly a week and it smells properly fermented, I transfer the jars to the fridge where I store them until they're eaten over the next few months. My typical routine for eating sauerkraut is just like how I add the liver pate. I incorporate it into my daily breakfast, adding a scoop on top of my morning eggs. While we love making almost everything from scratch, I'm grateful that there is now way more access to really high quality, nutrient-dense foods to supplement a healthy diet. And one of my favorite companies to support is Ancient Nutrition. So I'm always looking to add more sources of high quality protein into my diet, and I love their protein powders. Lately, I've been experimenting with their new advanced multi-collagen protein powder that includes 10 different types of collagen, including the collagen from nutrient-dense organ meats and bone broth protein, which you guys already know that I'm a big fan of. This formula also contains organic ashwagandha root extract and cinnamon to help your body with a healthy response to stress, feel balanced, and maintain a healthy weight. Because of the cinnamon in this protein powder, my favorite way to have it is to mix a scoop into around 10 ounces of milk with a tablespoon or so of carob powder. The cinnamon and the carob powder combo is delicious, and using a little handheld milk frother to mix it together works perfectly to avoid any grittiness that can sometimes come with collagen powders. Right now, Ancient Nutrition is offering 25% off your first order when you go to ancientnutrition.com/fromscratch. That's ancientnutrition.com/fromscratch for 25% off your first order. ancientnutrition.com/fromscratch. The last thing diet-wise that I specifically added, in addition to just eating a real food diet, was a daily raw carrot salad. I've always been prone to low progesterone, and I could tell based on my cycles that I was experiencing some hormone imbalances, specifically unbalanced estrogen and progesterone. The magic of the raw carrot salad is that it prevents the reabsorption of estrogen in the intestine and can shift the balance away from cortisol and estrogen and toward progesterone. It binds and carries away estrogen excreted in the gut along with aiding healthy digestion. To make carrot salad, I shred a whole medium carrot, or because we're using our homegrown carrots, that might mean 2 smaller carrots or whatever we have on hand. Add a splash of apple cider vinegar and a teaspoon or so of coconut oil and mix that all together. It's actually quite tasty, and regardless, the benefits have been well worth it for me. Over the years, I've incorporated the carrot salad at different times of the day, sometimes adding it as a side to our meals, but right now my breakfast pretty much every day is a raw carrot salad followed by 4 scrambled eggs with a scoop of liver pate mixed in and topped with some sauerkraut. It's satisfying, actually quite delicious, and a great way to pack in so many nutrients into the beginning of the day. I look back and cringe at my breakfasts of the past, like the fat-free yogurt and toast that I had all throughout high school. I want to emphasize that there are no magic pills when it comes to getting pregnant. However, I do believe that incorporating these 4 things, regular organ meats, bone broth, fermented foods, and daily carrot salad, along with a balanced whole food diet and healthy lifestyle, have really made a difference in balancing my hormones that I believe definitely helped lead to 4 healthy pregnancies.
Daddy? Yeah.
Another thing that I found, especially for me with a history of undernourishing my body, is that making sure I'm eating enough and at regular, consistent intervals has really seemed to help my body to trust that food is plentiful and coming and feel safe enough to be able to prepare for pregnancy. If your body is in stress or thinks that food may be scarce, it's not going to think that now would be a great time to have a baby. But if it knows that it's safe and that it has plenty of resources to nourish a new life, then that can make a big difference. Again, not medical advice, but just wanted to share what I'd use as far as prenatal vitamins. I've tried a few different brands throughout my pregnancies and also opted to not use prenatals with one of my pregnancies. And where I'm currently at is that I'd personally recommend and would use for myself is the prenatal vitamins from Seeking Health. Their optimal prenatal and prenatal essentials are both great depending on your needs. And they also have a completely non-methylated prenatal that is the first of its kind and a really great option for those that need it. So my background is in nutrition, and when I have free time, these are the things that I love to learn about and dive deeper into. And plus, I think it really helped me mentally when I was in this journey of infertility to feel like I was taking steps to improve my health and the health of my future baby just by doing something. And while I believe that diet is huge, other lifestyle factors can play a big role too. Reducing stress is so important. Like I said before with food, if the body is under significant amounts of stress, those are all signals to the body that now is not a good time to get pregnant. Whatever you can do to reduce stress, take a deep breath, pray, dance, spend time with a friend, take a bath, whatever helps you to slow down and regulate your nervous system to get out of that fight or flight state, do more of that. For me, engaging in balanced exercise and getting plenty of sleep was big. Like I shared earlier, I was an extreme long-distance runner for many years, but for the last decade, I've been taking early morning walks outside instead, and that's been so good for me physically, but also mentally and spiritually as well. For years, I lived frustrated with my body, and I put a significant amount of blame and pressure on myself. That season of my life was one of the hardest times I've ever been through, And if you find yourself there, I'm so very sorry because it's so hard and every story is unique. But looking back, I learned so much during that time and that season that changed and grew me and grew our marriage and grew our family in ways that I never would have experienced otherwise. And I'm beyond grateful for that story and where it's brought us.